On September 14, 2021, at 1:39 in the darkness of night in Mantua Township, New Jersey, Police Corporal Salvatore Aldradi responded to a bizarre 911 call. The facts he was working with: burglars, at least one of whom was armed, and they were still at the home. They pulled up to the house to see someone in the front yard, and Corporal Aldradi's partner warned him that the subject had a gun. Every cop's nightmare became true, and he was forced to use deadly force in the blink of an eye. And without hesitation, Salvatore Aldradi took on the role of EMT as he tried to save the person he just shot. The story then took a twist when they learned that it was actually the homeowner who pointed the gun at them. Even in light of these facts, the Attorney General's office in New Jersey investigated the use of force and cleared Corporal Aldradi. Until almost 2 years later, a new Attorney General stepped in and revived the case. He drew an indictment card with the grand jury. The case has a layered effect. And cases like these don't just weigh heavy on these officers. It's a 2+ year wet blanket on an entire family and possibly an entire town. We're here to talk to Drew and Barbara Aldradi, the passionate parents of Corporal Salvatore Aldradi, and we'll get the first-hand facts of what happens to a family that has to live in that nightmare. I'm Drew Breezy. I'm here with Jonathan, and this is the Comm Center.
911, where's your emergency?
Two intruders in the back of my yard.
What town's it in?
Mantua.
Mantua? Are you off Elm Avenue?
Yeah. One of them had a gun for sure.
Okay.
How
many were there?
Threw a firecracker with them to get them to go, but they keep coming back, like looking through the fence.
Okay, hold on for the police. I'm going to transfer you. Caller reported intruders on the property, and he believes one of them had a gun.
Hello?
One of them definitely had a gun. I saw him. I mean, I came out and I lit off a quarter stick to scare them away, but they came back.
Okay. How many people were there?
Two. That I saw, and then as I came back, there was a woman. And
Do you have a description of the individuals?
I'm going to say the one guy, he looked like to me maybe in his mid-60s.
You got white males,
long,
black males, Hispanic males?
White, long, like thinning hair. The other guy was a black guy.
So one white male, one black male?
Yeah, and the other girl, I really couldn't get a look. She was behind the fence.
What were they doing?
Well, when I looked out my window, the one guy was in my shed, getting my shed door open. And then I came around to go outside to confront him, and there was a guy fucking in my truck trying to get it open.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Or where are they at now?
It almost looked like somebody's in my truck.
Okay. Mantua, Cars County. 257 Elm Avenue. 257 Elm Avenue. 911 phone call. Cars advising two subjects on his property. One male was trying to get into his shed. One male possibly in his truck now. He advised that one may have baby.
I'm getting ready to go in the house, dude. I don't know if these guys... I mean, I have something my grandfather passed down to me. I don't know how legal it is. Okay. In a will. There you go.
Did you see the weapon?
I mean, it was silver. The moonlight came off of it, and I knew it. I don't know what type it was, but it was a handgun.
Okay. Did you see it, though?
Yes, sir.
Caller said he tried to make contact with the individuals and saw the handgun.
So then I went back in the house. Like I said, my grandfather willed me a .45. I don't know what I'm allowed to do or do without that.
Are you talking with my officers? Sir. Yeah. I copy. I copy. I'm going to start a BL.
Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who will stop at nothing to stop all Philistinism and a miss. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher. I've been doing this job for almost 10 years. Joining us as our host, as always, is Drew Breezy. He spent just short of 30 years in the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office as a dispatcher, a sheriff's deputy, a corporal, a sergeant, lieutenant, and detective. He's joining us, lending us his credulity as a law enforcement officer. We appreciate everybody who's joining us on this special Thanksgiving episode. We hope that you guys have a great week with your families on Thanksgiving. Family is an important theme of the episode tonight. Before we get started, I just want to remind you, if you want to be part of the show, you can always call 848-COMM-911. That's 848-266-6911. You can join us, leave a voicemail for the Comm Center. We'd appreciate it. As always, join us on YouTube. We hope that you're watching here, or if you're just listening, check us out on YouTube. Hit like and subscribe. As always, we would appreciate it. If you have thoughts on this case, the Salvatore Andrade case in Mantua Township, New Jersey, please leave a comment. We're usually pretty responsive to that. We can get back to you in the comments and address whatever your concerns or questions are. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. That helps the podcast succeed in the charts. Same thing on Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating and review. You can find us, as always, on Instagram. Look for us there. You can interact with us. Also on X, you can find content from the Comm Center there. We're also still on Facebook. If you wanted to find content on that platform, you could as well. We are still in week number 30 of being banned from TikTok, so we are not allowed to be there. Something new this week, of course, is that we have opened a Discord for the fans. So if you're looking to connect with other fans of the Comm Center, you can do that on Discord. You can find details. Just let us know if you're interested in doing that. Drew, I just want to dive into it since we have some guests. I want to welcome to the show Drew Andrade. He's a 37-year veteran of the Philadelphia Police Department. He's on SWAT. He actually has more experience than Drew here, so he may take over the show at any time, and we welcome that. And, of course, Barbara Andrade also is here. She's teaching for somewhere around 20 years. She can correct the record if I've got that wrong, but she teaches second grade, which means I am ready to join her class. But please welcome to the show, Barbara and Drew Andrade. It's really nice to have you guys here. Thank you, first of all, for taking time away from your busy lives. We want to just give you the opportunity to tell the other side of it, because certainly the news is going to talk about what happened there in New Jersey, and they're going to have their say. But so often, you mentioned that you're not under any kind of gag order or anything, but we want to hear from you. You've certainly talked to Corporal Andrade, who was involved in this. But before we get going, I'll just read the quick facts of the case, if that's okay with you. Drew, Barbara, first of all, how are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
I'm really glad that you're here, and you can tell that I'm not really polished on having guests, so please bear with me. But New Jersey Attorney General Matthew J. Platkin, I assume that's the guy that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about, announced on Wednesday that the grand jury returned an indictment against Mantua Township police officer Salvatore Andrade, charging him with manslaughter in connection with the death of Charles Sharp III, who was 49, of Mantua. A state grand jury voted to file criminal charges against a police officer who shot and killed a man who dialed 911 reporting intruders outside of his home in New Jersey in 2021. New Jersey Attorney General Platkin announced Wednesday that the grand jury returned an indictment against Salvatore Andrade, the police officer, charging with manslaughter in connection with the death. He says, quote, Mr. Sharp was shot multiple times outside of his own home by one of the very officers he called upon for help. His life was cut short in seconds after Officer Andrade arrived at the scene while Mr. Sharp was still on the phone with the police dispatcher. We, of course, covered that in a previous episode of the Comm Center. If you want to watch that, go ahead and click on the link that we'll put on the screen for you. Attorney General Platkin said, when residents call 911 for services, they are concerned, they need assistance, they seek protection, and they trust the officers responding in their calls will respond accordingly and help them. Tragically, that did not happen here. And then there's details here about how there was one guy by the shed, and he went out to confront them, and there was a guy in the truck, and we played all of that. But I want to know how you guys, first of all, how is the family doing? Because we can only imagine how this affects your son, Sal. But how has this affected your family since the news came down? It's not just going to affect his career, And you mentioned he's newly married and all this, but how is it affecting all of you guys? How are you holding up in the midst of this?
You know, we do our best. We have to band together because we have to stay strong for him, and we have to be his voice to advocate for this miscarriage of justice. So, you know, we have our good days and bad days, our good moments and bad moments, but we have to keep fighting the good fight because we will win in the end. So we have to keep pushing forward.
I really love that optimism. Drew, as someone who's still a police officer, how does this affect you as you do your job?
I still go out there every day, do my job the way it's supposed to be done.
Okay.
I mean, we're here to help people, and that's what we do. So we go out every day and we do it.
Which is exactly what I find so hurtful. I'm Drew, by the way, Drew Breezy. I go by Drew Breezy for the purposes of this conversation. I may go by my real name, Andrew Baxter, so we don't confuse the two Drews, and you can get used to hearing the Philly accent. So you bring an important point. We go out there and we do our job, and Salvatore seemingly was doing his job that night. I mean, it's not like the guy came out wearing a T-shirt that said, "I'm the homeowner." It doesn't matter. They were called to a residence where somebody had a gun, and it was very clear in the 911 call. You can go back and listen to our episode, you being the listener or viewer. You can go back and listen to the 911 call itself. It's ridiculous how many times he kind of tries to pry that information in there that somebody is armed, and then he shows up outside upon police arrival and points the gun at them. I mean, what is the expected outcome of that?
We don't point guns at police officers, no matter if it's, you know, innocent or detrimental, you're trying to harm them. You know, what do you think they're going to do? They have a split second to make a decision. And in this case, he already pointed the gun at one police officer, which obviously the news media forgot to mention that he already pointed the gun at another officer's face and then proceeded to turn and have the gun pointed at my son.
I don't have a favorable opinion of how the media covers these stories because they're chasing the sensationalism of advertising dollars. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily in it for justice unless there's something in it for them. But I have to ask, do you think that the story was released in a way so as not to let the public know that guy pointed the gun at those officers before he was fired upon?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is all coming off of the Fund the Police movement. So, you know, when this job comes out, the police station is right around the corner from where this job comes out. And the first officer on the scene is Corporal Layton. As he pulls up, and this guy's still on an open line with 911. As soon as he pulls up, he asks the guy, "Hey, can I help you?" Before he gets that out of his mouth, this guy's standing there and points a gun right to his head. And you can hear on the 911 tape, the officer says, "Drop the gun," or "Put the gun down." And you could hear his car speeding off, getting out of harm's way, because he believed at that moment he was going to get shot and killed. The video is purposely cut by the AG's office to have a different spin with the public, like pulling on people's heartstrings. And I think there was about 15 seconds or so that was taken off of that initial film.
That was something that I discovered in editing it for the show because I was trying to line up the 911 call with the body cam. I'm just trying to get the timing right for the purposes of making it flow for the show. And all of a sudden I realized I'm hearing stuff in the 911 call that I'm not seeing in the body cam. I'm hearing somebody in the background of that 911 call. I'm hearing an officer giving commands to put down the gun. And what we see from the body cam that got released by the AG's office, it's not there. So when I was editing it together, I'm realizing that, like, as I try to overlay these sounds, because I'm trying to make the audio flow from one end to the other, that they don't match up. I can't make them meet because the video that was released, there's something missing there. So
and that's why we reached out to you, because when we saw it, obviously it was sent to us just past weekend, and you recorded that 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You didn't know us. We didn't know you. You didn't know. You were using your professionalism and your training to dissect that video. And as soon as I saw that, my husband and I were like fist bumping, like, yes, like they are
Finally,
doing
someone that knows what's going on.
right.
I came across it quite by accident. I assure you, it was just an editing thing. I was just trying to make a quality podcast, and actually, it occurred to me. I'm just like, I wonder if, and I was naive. You'll have to excuse me, but I'm like, I'm wondering if like the people who put this together are aware of that there's clearly like something that's been cut out of there, or if it was cut out there for a reason. Like maybe a good reason, like, maybe they don't want to show something, like, sometimes there's sensitive material. I'm sure, Drew, you understand that police officers see things that the public shouldn't necessarily see. And, you also wouldn't want to inflame the public for something they can't understand. So I figured, there's got to be some reason why these things don't meet up. So I didn't necessarily assume that there was something nefarious at foot. But obviously, you guys being close to the case, you feel like something was withheld or something was held back or edited.
Doesn't fit their narrative. The narrative is he just pulled up and he started shooting. And as you're going to hear, that is not the case. And then when you hear all the other parts that go into this, it's unbelievable that we're here.
It's quite clear that you like. I would never suggest you read YouTube comments as a human, like,
no.
Regardless of having some, experience in an interaction like this. But we read the YouTube comments. I mean, I think you may have seen on the previous episode.
We did.
And it seems that, and this is why I'm going to push back on you, John, a little bit. This wasn't by accident that we discovered this. You discovered it perhaps by accident, a happy accident, but it didn't line up. None of it lined up. None of it matched from minute one. And you showed it to me for the first time raw. And even like when that whole thing was going down, it doesn't jive, especially when you hear on the 911 call him saying, you hear the corporal saying, put the gun down. We didn't know it was the corporal, of course.
Yeah.
And you hear him say, put the gun down. Then out of nowhere, it just doesn't jive with the body cam video. You see Salvatore pull up. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know that this was by accident. We look, I'm not trying to ride on a high horse here, but we tend to push the truth and we'll look at stuff objectively as we can. And just like you said, we didn't know you from Adam, and we looked at that objectively, and something's amiss here. It just doesn't seem right. And so if we could, let's go all the way back to young Salvatore. I mean, he grew up a cop's kid, right? And what let's get an idea of what he's been through in his career.
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 boys, and he was the only one that took a keen interest in policing from like a baby. He just, would dress up like SWAT for, Halloween. He was always interested in what his dad was doing. He would love to watch like Cops. He would research. Like, he wasn't someone that just got in it because he watched an episode of CSI and thought, oh, that looks cool. His sole purpose to get into it was he had a passion for it, and he loved the whole dynamics of it and wanting to help people. He loved the training. When he was 14, we have a program over here in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Police Explorers, which he did for 4 years. So he did PT, he did scenario training, he did classroom instruction until he was 18. And then he had the opportunity to move in with my parents in South Jersey, and he became a special law enforcement officer with Gloucester Township Police Department. Again, more training, more experience. And at the young age of 19, he was able to enter the police academy, and he became an officer in Camden, New Jersey, one of the most dangerous cities in this, in the state of New Jersey. So he had a lot of experience at a very young age, and he just excelled. We would get, I know when we would go to pick him up, or officers would go to see my husband, would just talk wonderful things about him, just saying how he was always motivated and he followed directions. He took constructive criticism well. I mean, everything you would want to make a really good cop or a great cop, he possesses, and he still possesses to this day.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in his blood, he's not going to lose that. Is
No.
that your experience, Drew?
Yeah, he was great. Trained hard, excelled. We come from a police family. I'm a police officer. My brother-in-law, I have other cousins that are police officers. Just somebody you want on your side. Someone, when the shit hits the fan,
Yeah. In fact, when he was working in Camden, his good partner, well, his good friend and his partner, Officer Patrick O'Hanlon, they were responding to some suspicious suspects, and Officer O'Hanlon approached one of the suspects. There was a confrontation, a foot pursuit happened, and the suspect pulled out a weapon and shot him in the leg. And then they were still fighting. He was trying to get control of the gun. The suspect then put a gun up to O'Hanlon's head and pulled the trigger, and it jammed. Whoa. Now, my son is en route because he knows he needs to get there to help him. And I mean, he was bleeding out of his leg, and he was the only one that had a tourniquet, because my son, like I said, research. What did he need to save his life or other officers' life or other pedestrians, civilians' lives, whatever? He was going to make sure that he had the necessary tools to save their life. And he put that tourniquet on him, and they got him to the hospital. And the doctor said that we would have a totally different story or a scenario right now. He would have lost a lot of blood if Salvatore didn't have that tourniquet. And the department after that all got tourniquets, and my son did some speaking and talking to people about that. So, always prepared.
The motto of the Boy Scouts of America is "Be prepared." That's the explorers. And the reason I know this is because I was one. Your Salvatore's story it mirrors mine. I can't tell you how about the parallels. I can't tell you enough about the parallels. So I grew up as being a cop for Halloween all the time. It's just I didn't come from a law enforcement family, but I got pictures of me as a kid, in a cop uniform, and just the same. I spent a couple of years as a law enforcement explorer right before I went into the Air Force. Mm-hmm. Things changed a little bit after that, and then I eventually got back into law enforcement. So I completely identify with this. I also identify with always being in the right place at the right time, or being an active and honorable police officer, like not sitting under a shade tree during the day, or not sitting behind the Wawa at night all night, out there doing active policing, which often leads to being in the right place at the right time. And then with him, being prepared his whole life, has this tourniquet on him, which again, we're talking about like it would have been pre-2020 or 2020-ish that this happened, that happened. We weren't really talking about tourniquets at that point. It was just starting to become a thing in the more progressive agencies. And, like if we're going to save lives, let's save our own lives first too.
Right.
So can you, like, other than the obvious sinking feeling you have when you have a loved one that's a police officer, I'm sure that there's a constant state of worry hanging over you, Barbara.
Yeah.
What's it? Could you tell us a little bit about what it's like to get that phone call when he's involved in a shooting the first time?
So, and it's funny that you said that, because I tell this story all the time. He was working when he was in Camden. He was overnight. He would work overnight and then day work. And of course, him and I always spoke every night before I went to bed. Have a good night, be safe. I had his tracker so I could see where he was. Sometimes he was on the footbeat. He wasn't even in a car. Then if he was at the station. So this one night, I said to him, our normal, good night, I love you, be safe, yada, yada. Okay, Mom. And then I went to go walk the dog. And I was walking the dog. And boy, I just got this sick feeling came over me. And I still have this. I saved the text message. And I immediately picked up my phone. I said, Salvatore, please be extra, extra safe tonight. And then within about a half an hour, I'd gotten into bed. My husband just got in the shower, and I got a phone call from a friend who was listening to the police scanner. And they said, oh my God, there was a cop shop in Camden. It's either Pat or Sal, according to the area that they're in. I cannot get a hold of Salvatore. And immediately, your heart sinks, but you have to try and stay calm, because now I have to, I'm trying to tell him, get out of the shower. And then the same time, someone from SWAT's calling him to say that they heard an officer was shot. My other boys were downstairs. I'm, open the door, because I'm thinking if it is him, somebody's going to come and get me, even though we're over the bridge. And it was a little bit of controlled chaos for a few minutes. I called my brother, who had a very big part in Salvatore's career, and he's got a lot of connections in New Jersey. He was a New Jersey police officer. And for like a good 10 minutes, we didn't know if it was him or Pat. And then I got the phone call that it was Pat, that Salvatore's at the hospital with him, to start making our way there. So, of course, we got right in the car, got there. The hospital was surrounded by police. We had to tell them who we were so we could get in. And the amount of police support that was already in the room at the hospital, just, showing up in droves. And then, my son was clearly felt horrible that, I should have been there. I should have been there. I should have got there faster. But then we were able to go up and see Pat and see that he was okay, and just start the healing process from there.
Drew, so sending, like if you've ever been a field training officer, I don't know if you have or not, but you see the young officers that come up, and you kind of just, do a pretty quick assessment when you meet somebody or when you deal with somebody for a little bit, and you're like, that he'll be all right. He'll be fine. Knowing that they probably will be all right and they will be fine, but it's always in the back of your mind. Can you separate that with a child being in law enforcement? Did you have the same instinct and the same feeling, or was it a different level of worry for Salvatore?
No, I always worry because he's my son. I know what's out there, all the years.
Right.
So I worry about all these guys and girls, especially when it's your own kid. It's even more so because, he just has a knack for police work. Oh, this guy has a gun, or this guy, is wanted for something, or whatever it may be. He just has that knack, and he's a trainer. Like, he goes away to all these different schools, and he comes back and he trains the guys and the girls, and he's like the go-to guy on stuff. He's an armorer, he's very proficient in his firearms, everything, his tactics. He either they pay or he pays his own way. But yeah, even though it's my own son and he's can handle himself, I always worry, because I'm not there with him.
Right.
And I always worry because I can't be there with either of them. So I put my faith in God, and I ask that they're protected and that I put it in His hands, because if I literally had to worry every single moment, I would be a basket case.
Sure. So now we have a new set of worries, though, and back in 2021 it was getting worse. The new set of worries is like we have to worry about Salvatore's safety, right? If he's out on the street. Now, it seems that the Attorney General's office in New Jersey wanted to make sure that we have to worry about whether Salvatore effectively does his job to defend his fellow officer or perceive a threat within a quarter second. Mm-hmm. And that adds a whole new layer to it. Were there any lasting effects, do you think, from the first incident he was in?
No, I mean, he was, they obviously gave him time off. And then I think it was like a week, he went back and he was right out there again. It didn't stop him. He wasn't someone that just, like you said, sat back and waited. Oh, let me wait for this other officer to respond, or I'll wait until this officer comes. That wasn't the situation. He was able to get right back into the swing of things to do his job.
Yeah, he wasn't lax or complacent. Did he suffer from any post-traumatic stress from that incident? I don't believe so. And if he did, it didn't show.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, those
You know,
are invisible wounds. Go ahead, John.
You guys are here and you're defending your son. And it may be the case that he's facing charges and certainly in the court of public opinion, he's on trial, but he's not on this show. I appreciate that you guys are here to defend him. I want to talk about the person who should really be spoken about in this case. And it seems like every time there's an unfortunate outcome with the police being called or being dispatched by 911 dispatchers after a 911 call, they're being invited to someone else's crisis, to someone else's crime, to someone else's mishap. The article that I just read from Philadelphia, curiously absent, did it mention much going on with Charles Sharp? And in fact, Barbara, you and I had a phone call the other day in which I found out more than about Charles Sharp III than I have ever seen in any news articles.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I always get frustrated because when things like this go wrong, people always say, well, did the police do things right? Drew, you just asked a question, and a fair question, because he cares about your son. But like, did any of these prior things affect him? Was he at his peak efficiency? What kind of police officer is he? What kind of guy was Charles Sharp? That's the question that I want to know, because so many of these police officers, and I'm talking to two of them, and if you don't mind me speaking out of hand, but I don't think either one of you mind that if you just sit in your car all night, eating donuts and drinking coffee, I don't think that's necessarily a bad shift for you, particularly after 30 plus years. I don't think either one of you mind that. And so, but what happens is that Mr. Charles Sharp decided to pick up a fake firearm, which is a recurring motif on this show. We have covered just a lot of cases with fake firearms. We actually covered one the week before last. He picked up a fake firearm, called 911, and he brought a lot of what happened on himself. Now, there's people out there that will push back and say, well, he didn't deserve what happened to him or whatever. My grandma always said it took two to tango. And every time an incident like this happens, there's enough blame to go around. It's not just on the police officers, although they have a high amount of power, and so they have a high amount of responsibility. And I'm not against citizenry questioning the police or questioning police actions. But we also do need to hold people like Charles Sharp accountable, because Charles Sharp is a grown man. He has his own agency. He decides what he's going to do. And he's the one that picked up a fake gun that night. He's the one that picked up the phone and dialed 911 and invited your son and this other corporal to his house. Mm-hmm. And so, although, it's not exactly classy to speak ill of the dead, he did drag your son and your whole family into this ongoing drama that none of you needed for 3 years.
Yeah.
And at the risk of talking out of turn, it won't even end at a criminal case. I'm sure that there's the potential for civil stuff's pending. Usually the civil stuff waits for after the criminal stuff so that they can use the criminal stuff in the civil case.
Yeah.
So you guys have been put through plenty, and I would just like to offer anything that you would like to share, or whatever just due to your closeness to the case. What can you tell us about Mr. Charles Sharp, this fine citizen? I'll mention that he was a veteran of the Air Force, but so was Drew. And look at that guy. So I don't know that it's necessarily.
Well, that was another interesting thing when you had made that comment, what somebody had put in the comments, that he was a military veteran. So my husband and my belief is we're not here to speak ill will of the dead. We're not.
No.
It's not our intention. Mr. Sharp had a lot of demons that he was battling. And you're right. Well, my son's actions that night were justified because of his training, because of policy and procedure. He was justified. Once the investigation was complete, he was justified in his shooting and his actions. But you're right. Mr. Sharp had a long history of substance abuse. He was alcoholic for many years, and then would recently started doing drugs. How do we know this? We have the family's statements.
And the toxicology report from the
toxicology report. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're right. He did call the cops. And not only did he call the cops because, like Mr. Plankton said, he was concerned they were breaking in. There was nobody there. Nobody was breaking into his shed. His shed was padlocked.
It was a fictitious story, a made-up story that he made up.
But the news didn't tell you that. There was nobody breaking into his car because he had a DUI and he had to blow into one of those machines.
He had a breathalyzer machine in his car in order for it to work.
Right.
So that wasn't happening. Plus, he had high levels of cocaine and methamphetamines in his system, as well as other drugs.
Right.
This article
So
doesn't have any addendums or
No,
updates to it.
no,
you
it's
know?
not,
No,
doesn't.
and they never seem to correct the record.
And
So
we are,
that's why we're here with you.
yeah, I mean, that's great. And that's what our mission has been, is to, be his voice, because, I can't stand liars. If
can't
you, here's what I say. You give them all the evidence, which the Attorney General has all the evidence, which is why after the shooting, he was cleared by the Attorney General's State Police Shooting Response Team. That's who investigates their shootings, because they took it out of the local department's hands for transparency.
yes,
That's a very interesting detail. I didn't know that. So
yes,
this wasn't even it wasn't investigated by the township or
No.
a neighboring agency, so that there could be like a thread of, hey,
They want an
don't worry, we'll
unbiased
take
opinion.
care of it. Right. So explain a little bit more of who it was that investigated it.
So in 2018, 2019, the Attorney General's office came out with a new guideline saying all police shootings in the state of New Jersey will be investigated by the Attorney General's office, as well as the New Jersey State Troopers shooting team. So all shootings throughout the New Jersey will be investigated by an unbiased law enforcement agency. So on my son's shooting, the AG's office, along with the New Jersey State Troopers shooting team, investigated it. They cleared the shooting. He was justified for a justifiable shooting, and he was sent back to work for almost 2 years before he was frivolously indicted under a new AG trying to make a name for himself.
And we've seen that playing out across the country, of course, because even though they can be cleared, they still remain vulnerable at any time to the whims of these new politicians who are coming in, like I said, trying to make hay. And this incident occurred in 2021, which was kind of the height of, as you said, Drew, of the defund movement.
Right.
And prosecutors are elected officials, and it's very, very unpopular to be a prosecutor because you're charged with locking people up and with the police. They work hand in hand with the police, but the police are such a liability now for them politically, even when they act justifiably, just as your son did. Right. They have to, in order to curry favor politically or to gain favor with voters, they have to hang people like your son or Matthew Mistretta or Ben Darby out to dry. And they don't care who gets in the way because they want to continue to go golfing with judges and other lawyers and defense attorneys.
And that's what, so, for a good almost a year, well, from May until this past March, that was always something that I fought for was, I'm concerned about the corruption that he's facing, because this is a clear indictment based on emotions, and you can indict a ham sandwich, right? You can, right. It's a low level to indict. So, how good is that system of having a grand jury if you can just not present anything? And then remember, there's nobody there representing my son.
He's not even legally allowed to be
right.
there.
Right.
And you don't understand a grand jury process.
Right.
He's not allowed to be there. The Attorney General or the prosecutor takes whatever they have, shows it to people who are not informed on the law, probably don't want to be there, disinterested. Right. And then the test for them is like, do you think we have enough to go to trial? And then it's like,
right.
Probably,
here's information, you sort through it.
Yeah.
Which, gets my goat. But the kicker for us, which led us to start down this path of speaking out, was the Office of, it's called OPIA, the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability, which is within the Attorney General's office, who is the ones that are going after these, officers for doing their job. Not the corruption, not police brutality, nothing like that. I mean, they do that, but that's not some of these cases that they're going after. And we got word that the head, Tom Eicher, was stepping down, but not only was he just stepping down, retiring, he was stepping down amidst all these allegations of corruption within his office about withholding exculpatory evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. And that's exactly what they did to my son. He was cleared. The Attorney General representative sat down with his chief, the captain, and all the guys, And before he could go back to work, they had to go over the findings and say, listen, was it a perfect shoot? No, someone lost their life. It's very tragic. Very tragic.
There's no pretty use of force. It always looks bad, right?
Right. And then she said, there's nothing criminal here. If there was anything criminal, he would not have been allowed to go back to work. He would have been put on the shelf until either arrested or put on the shelf until, he was indicted. That didn't happen. He was able to go back to work, continue, become Officer of the Year for a second time, made corporal, and then when they presented the information, a new attorney general had stepped in, these left progressive liberals, and this is their thing. They go after them. So once and I'm telling you, you can look this up, and I have links, article after article after article of what they're doing in these cases and having this misconduct. And I was like, oh, look, that's the, pot calling the kettle black, right? You're doing this. This is what you're doing to these officers. That's why we're looking forward to the new set of administration coming in, because they support police. Police officers have to have a certain level of immunity. And for all these people out here, he should have did this. Listen, I'm not asking you for your opinion. We're not talking about opinions. We're going by facts. He did not violate the use of force policy for Mantua. He did not violate the use of force policy for the state of New Jersey. Your own shooting team cleared him. Nothing criminal.
And what's the point of the shooting team and all of that process? What's the point of it if still later an opportunistic attorney general would be like, well, what do you got in the books? What can I cook to make myself look good? What can you dust off and dig up that I can go after and make some hay out of? Because that's exactly what happened. What is this new guy who came in office? What does he care about? It doesn't reflect on him at all.
Right.
And it's not like it's something that he had to fix.
Right. And like you said, the YouTube comments or people, and listen, this is not your line of business. You don't know the ins and outs of the job. You don't know. Police officers have a gun for a reason. That is their tool. That is their weapon. No, they cannot misuse it and just pull it out and do this and do that. But when you have a gun pointed in your face, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. We don't point guns at police officers. They have a right. Oh, he should have given commands. He doesn't have to give commands. It says when feasible.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to. How long are you going to wait? By the time
you don't have to wait till the beat of the weapon is pointed at you.
No, you don't. You don't. Right. Exactly. And everyday people. Right, Graham versus Connor. Everyday people don't understand this, and I don't blame them, but somebody's got to educate them. Somebody's got to educate the news media to say, you're not presenting the correct material. And then on top of it, getting back to your original question, after they did the investigation, he was cleared criminally, but when they started to look into Mr. Sharp's background, the house was flagged. That was not relayed to police. And I had made some notes because we had talked about like what we wanted to make corrections. They don't have computers in their cars. They don't have trackers in their cars to say how far out they are. They were responding 2 streets over from the police station. The dispatch never informed the homeowner that the homeowner was armed. They knew they were responding to a call of an armed man. So that man, Charles Sharp, in my son's eyes, is the armed man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Once they did the investigation, the first thing the sister said was, oh my God, he committed suicide. He had mental issues. He had PTSD. He had drug issues. He had alcohol issues. The ex-wife, who is now suing him civilly, goes on for 18 minutes in her statement, who she asked to speak to the police, the detective, saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I want to hug that officer. I feel so bad. He did this. Meaning her ex-husband. He did this. So they have all that. 18 minutes, she goes on. And now she has the nerve to turn around and sue him civilly. Well, you know what? That audio recording that maybe she doesn't, money. And you know what? Karma's going to come around because that tape can be released civilly. When you're in a civil court, there's no, let's argue this, argue that.
Right.
How she felt horrible. She has a notebook of all the times he tried to kill himself. Too many times to count. How they had it come.
she might have actually felt bad until an attorney
She did.
approached her and said,
told
like,
her to
hey,
close your
if
mouth.
you throw in with me, we could walk away with
Right.
this with $7 million, because she and the attorney both know, you know, you don't actually have to make a case civilly, because
No.
the city or the township in this case probably has a certain threshold where, hey, if somebody suits us and we just look bad, in order to avoid the litigation
Right.
entirely, we'll settle. So she'll go out and sue the township or the officer or whatever, knowing that, you know, they can broker a peace deal, a plea agreement, in other words, and she can walk away with a chunk of change. So people in these games, they don't even have to play to
No.
win. They just
And
have
she
to play
gave
to
a
play, and the
statement, too.
attorney gets paid.
Her attorney gave a statement to some fact like, "Oh, we do not believe that we don't believe the gun was pointed." You just tattletaled on him for 18 minutes about all the things he did wrong. This big notebook, you have videos of him. The neighbors all gave statements that he was throwing M80s. He's disturbed. He needed help. And he's been in and out of rehab so many times. They've taken his real guns away. And like you hit the nail on the head, he was a military man. So the first thing you're taught in training is you don't point a weapon unless A, you're prepared to use it, or B, you're prepared to be fired upon. And you know what? I get a little fired up, and I apologize.
Don't
but,
apologize.
You know, this is our son. This is my son you're messing with. He did his job. He followed everything. And because you want to put a name for yourself, Mr. Attorney General and the Opia, and you want to sit there and you want to play on people's feelings, you've put all of our lives, you know, in disarray. That my son was just getting married when he was indicted. The most happiest time of his life. And they tried to, you know, overshadow that. A new father, no pay, no insurance. I'm just outraged. And the people in this country and in New Jersey should be outraged as well. And that's why this election went the way that it did, because we have had enough of this crap. And we're going to stand up. And like you said you were with me, Drew, the other Drew. Drew Breezy, you said you were with me. You were going all the way with me. I want you on my back. I don't care whoever hears this. I've written senators, legislators. Not one of them has had the courage to call me back and to speak to me. And it's disrespectful. And you know what? I also got a hold of the news media. And I have a great man, a news reporter who's listening to our story. And he's writing a new article. And we have the great guys from Antipod Hero who gave me a chance. They were my angels. They answered my call. Good cop, bad cop. We just did Matthew Cox, True Crime. And now you guys, I'm ready to take them on. Give me phone numbers. Call me. I want this story to go viral because I've had it with this crap that they're trying to push and make my son look bad. And I'm not having it anymore. Okay.
Thank you very much. You shouldn't have to go this alone, and you're not alone. I assure you. I committed to being with you. I am most definitely with you. I'm behind you, in front of you, or on the side of you, wherever you need me to be. Drew, you and I came from an era where we didn't have to worry about body cams, so to speak. And I, you know, I'm not even saying worry about body cams in the sense that I cared what people saw, what I did. I think there are times when I wish I had a body cam, you know, way back in the day. In this instance, don't you think this would help? However, it hurt. Do you have an opinion either way about the body cam of this particular case?
Yeah, I think it shows what happened. Like, the body camera is not going to show you everything. It's on the center of your chest. So if you see in the one part where my son's driving, it looks like he's looking down at the steering wheel. That's the camera. He's looking ahead. He sees Charles Sharp come across with the gun and pointed at the gun.
He sees his arm extended.
You know, sees his arm. He thinks that he's telling him, "Hey, these guys ran over here across the street trying to get away." So when what they cut out on the film there is he gets out of his car only to get back into his car because he's the corporal taking off because he's getting out of harm's way, and they cut all that so you can't see the whole thing.
So that's the downside, is that now it can be used to make you look bad. So and we're not smart enough as a people to realize that, like, hey, this is taken out of context.
And I did find it suspicious that we only saw his body cam. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah. So they switched over to new body cameras. So the corporal, again, they're only 2 blocks away from headquarters. So they're trying to get there as quickly as humanly possible. So when the corporal pulls up, he's trying to turn on his body camera, and this guy sticks a gun to his face. So The time it buffers and comes on, he already sped up, and he gets out of his vehicle and it's on then. So there's a buffering of however there's might be 10 seconds or 5 seconds or a minute, whatever their new cameras are, you know. But this body camera, like when my son exits his car and he's telling him, "Hey, that guy has a gun," he's like, "Who?" He said, "The guy over there."
Yeah, that's captured. Like that was
in
another
between
thing that I noticed.
cars, and he illuminates him with his flashlight to show, "Hey, the guy does have a gun," and he tells him, "Drop the gun." Listen, this guy wasn't going to drop the gun at all. He was told he wanted a confrontation with the police, and we know now why, because he had his own plan. Okay, he suffered from suicidal ideations for many, many years and never got the help, you know. So when my son
Barbara, you said
him,
drugs were a part of it too, right?
A lot of drugs.
He was high on cocaine and meth.
Okay. In my agency last week, we had a guy who was high on methamphetamine, and he tried to bait police officers and having a confrontation. We were able to diffuse it. So I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And not only that, earlier in the evening, he goes over to the neighbor. I don't know if it was next door or across the street, a young gentleman, and he tells him they're trying to break in, and the neighbor sees the gun. He sees the gun, and he says, "You let police handle it." And he tells, and he's in his statement, he says he's acting erratically. He could tell he was on something, and he saw the weapon, and he was in fear of his life and his family's life because he was throwing off, you know, some firecrackers, M80s, whatever, and he didn't know if they were gunshots. So he feared for his family's life. He took them into the basement, okay, because he was afraid that a bullet was going to come through the window and harm them. And, you know, again, the ex-wife's statement, she says, you know, he's usually confrontational with me. And right before this happened, he was calm. He wasn't fighting with me. And he even said to me, "If anything happens to me, you know, everything goes to our son, right?" And she said, "You know, why are you talking like that?" So this is what gets my goat. I understand you have to look at my son's actions, again, which were justified. No policy, no procedure, nothing violated. Now you look into the background of this gentleman. I mean, they have it all. We have it all.
Even on the macro level, when you look at the background of the gentleman, the things he should know, you couple that with the drug use, the suicidal ideations. On the micro level, I'm hoping and I'm sure that the investigation carried them to find out if there were any intruders to debunk that whole thing. So was there any? They did.
Yeah. So, like I said, when my son gets out of the car, he illuminates him Sharp with a flashlight. Sees he's holding a gun, pointing his gun at him. He engages him. When Sharp goes to the ground, he's still in control of that firearm, pointing it at my son. My son illuminates him again with a flashlight, sees it, and engages him again. The third time he illuminates him with the flashlight, the gun's not there. As they're moving closer, Sharp extends his hands out and is aggressively looking for that gun. And you hear my son's body camera, "Stop reaching, stop reaching." So from there, they're able to move up on him. Then my son goes back to his truck, gets his EMT bag out because he's an EMT, and he starts doing life-saving measures on him. The other officers, because they're saying, "Okay, we have one guy here. Where's the other one?" So they move up to the property, try to set up a perimeter to secure the property. So when they secure it, they go into the house, and inside the house is a 120-pound Rottweiler. Oh. And they don't know that's Charles Sharp outside.
They don't know he's the homeowner.
They think he's one of the bad guys. They go through the house. They canvass the whole neighborhood and everything. And number one, his shed has the biggest lock on it, was never forced entry, was never tampered with, and his car was never tampered. It was just a fictitious story. There was no people at all. All the people they brought in that area, there were people walking down the street. They just grabbed everybody in that area. There was nothing. It was all fictitious story, made up story.
Oh, there were elements of it that just don't make sense in any sense. So like if there's somebody outside messing with your vehicle, his story was he went outside and had a confrontation in which guns were displayed. He had a gun, and then there's something about how he's throwing fireworks at them, and then he went back outside.
Quarter sticks.
Yeah, quarter sticks.
But it just
Right.
doesn't make any sense. If you think someone's breaking into your car, why are you going outside and confronting them? And if you are going to do that, why are you also calling the police? Like, let's take the insanity and the drugs all out of the story, is that it still doesn't add up. Like, I
Right.
take enough 911 calls of criminal entries into vehicles and prowler calls and burglary calls that my first reaction upon hearing the 911 is like, this just doesn't make sense.
We believe we highly believe the house was flagged for prior police actions for the house for suicide, and they've taken his guns before. So, not the officers that arrived on the scene that night, but prior, a year or two prior, they've taken him to the VA hospital. They've come there and taken his guns. And another thing, just real quick, I just want to say, when people say, "Oh, it was a fake gun," well, it was a replica, so it looks exactly like the original. Okay.
Yes.
So for people who can't comprehend that or understand, oh, what's a toy gun? And, look at your car and it's the exact same car. Everything's the same. How do you know which one is your car and which one's the real? It's exactly the same. And it was loaded. It had, and my husband can explain this better. It was,
And a magazine
had a
bullets,
magazine.
fake bullets and all, everything you would think. And all the neighbors who knew him always thought that was a real gun that he was shooting because he was always walking around with it. So
what's the difference? It doesn't have a firing pin or what? I mean, like, what does it come down to?
The firing pin's removed and it has a stock in the barrel. But if you remove that and put a firing pin on it, it would probably work fine.
So in other words, if he walked into a 7-Eleven and lifted his shirt and said, "Give me everything in the register,"
it's robbery.
It looks just like a 45. It's
exactly,
everything.
exactly like
everything.
He's going to be charged with armed robbery. Like, it's ridiculous that we're even having this conversation, this part of it. Like, it's
but the fake gun stuff comes up so much. I mean, you talk about Tamir Rice in Ohio and things like that. For some reason, people are not sensible enough to realize that if they're walking around with a fake firearm now, Charles Sharp being a special exception, obviously, with everything that's going on with him.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're getting into a police encounter and you have that going on, you're setting yourself up to get cooked at the risk of sounding insensitive. That's exactly what it is. Drew, I'm sure you can understand that as someone who does this for a living.
Yeah.
It looks like a gun.
And one of the other things too was they were never given a description of the suspect. Like when he called and he said, "Oh, man in his 60s, long hair." My son and the other officers didn't have that description.
Yeah,
so it's not like, "Oh, this doesn't match the gentleman." They know they're going to a high priority call. Somebody's there with a weapon. And now you're having a weapon pointed at one officer and now another officer. It's not. I don't know what we're doing here. Like, I just don't understand what we're doing.
I can explain some of it. I mean, first of all, is that, and Drew, you could probably back me up on some of that, either one of you, but it's like when you have a possible weapons violation, you've got a man with a gun, you're going to get there in a hurry. As you said, your son and this other corporal responded from the police station 2 blocks away. They're probably going to get there before a dispatcher can get a lot of these questions answered, get them typed into the CAD, get them out. As far as the address being flagged, that works imperfectly. We have covered issues like that on the show before. We talked about a woman who was killed in a fire once because we didn't get the apartment number added to the call and no one knew what apartment she was in. As far as an address being flagged, if a dispatcher mistypes the address, or like even if some systems are so finicky that if you format it differently, like if street is an ST, like capital both letters, like if it's S lowercase t, then the CAD system recognizes it as a different address and it doesn't show the flag. So, and it could be that the flag popped up, a dispatcher didn't see it and get to relay that information in time, and it happened too fast. All I could say is if it's flagged, the officers are supposed to know. That's how it goes. That's how it goes perfectly. Is the dispatcher is supposed to do that. All I could say is that it doesn't always go perfectly.
And the dispatcher was disciplined for this.
Okay, so we're a dispatcher centric show. The dispatcher is always disciplined in cases like this, by the way. But let's, in totality, and which side I'm on here.
Yeah.
In totality, you got this guy who's taking a 911 call who doesn't get to see the end of it. So he didn't know where he went wrong until it was put in front of him in a disciplinary package. But you talk about, OG body camera, like we've been listening to 911 recordings since 1986. Like we've been able to scrutinize 911 recordings since the dawn of 911. One, and two, think about the divided attention of that call taker. He's talking on the phone. He's also talking on the radio, and it's I suspect, and I don't know, and I'm not saying anything wrong about anybody doing anything, but I suspect that he was focused on getting the officers there, talking on the radio, making sure they were safe, while this guy is feeding him information about being armed that he's completely overlooking. And look, I'm not going to go to the top of the hill to defend that. I think what always gets taken away in the focus of this whole thing is the facts are Salvatore knew an address. He knew that there was an armed person at that address, and then an armed person was committing a crime. So he drove there like a police officer should, and he pulled up. Those are facts there.
Yes.
The facts on the other side of this, the guy who called 911 said, I have someone in my yard committing a crime. I know they have a gun because it's shown off the moonlight, which is a wackadoo story anyway, and made the conscious decision to go outside whether he pointed the gun or not. I know cops with guns are coming to save me, so let me go outside with my gun in my hand and meet them, and we'll have a wine and cheese party once they get here. And what did he think happened? So even in the 10,000 foot view, the cops had a set of facts that they were working with, and they reacted properly. The 911 caller, God rest his soul, he needed help. He was intoxicated, but he did not act appropriately. He did not act how he should have acted. A homeowner that's truly in fear probably isn't going to come out of their house, one, but two, certainly isn't going to come out of their house with a gun, so that they create more confusion for the good guys with the guns. Am I off?
No, I think you're on. And again, everybody has a job to do, and nobody's perfect. My son's not perfect. Nobody's perfect in their day-to-day jobs. People make mistakes and things like that. But when you look at the whole totality of it, when you look at no violations on my son, how he acted, when you look at, the 911 call, what they knew and what they didn't know, when you look at his actions, when you look at it in a total picture, it's even clearer that this was just a tragic night from a man who was having a lot of issues. But his actions led the police to come out and to cause this ripple effect that is now, 3 years this past September has changed not only our life, but his family's life. Yes, he was loved. Yes, he had a son. And my heart, I feel horrible that this son has to go through life without his father. But we can't just sit here and say, now that we have somebody that wants to go after police officers, well, we're going to go after you and that's it. And we're going to make an example of you. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to hold people accountable when they do the job incorrectly in any profession. And if it's something they violate, absolutely. But we're not just going to make up fictitious stories and try to go after the police and get the media to curtail to people's opinions or play on their emotions and pull on their heartstrings. You don't think my heartstrings are pulled on every day? You don't think I wake up every day thinking, what if I get a jury? What if we get a jury that doesn't see things the way that they are in the fact? You have to go on
what
fact.
If they just don't care? I mean, that's the jury you're most likely to get, is one jury that don't want to be there.
My son is facing 10 years for doing a job that he loves and doing it well. His police department even stood up for him. His chief would refuse to go with the narrative that the attorney general was putting out here and saying, oh, you have to go along with me. He said, no, this officer, and then not even like suspend it without pay. And again, if the state police found anything wrong, he would not have been, come on. If you do anything wrong, you're not going back to work.
The chief at that point would have been faced with a negligent retention issue.
Right.
So he got the okay from the attorney general's office.
Correct.
He's good to go. And on top of that, I'm so impressed with the chief that he pushed back on that. I don't know if it was the Office of Accountability or the attorney general's statement, but he said, look, the attorney general's painting it like, this guy called 911 for help and we didn't help. The hell we didn't. We showed up. Yeah. We showed up exactly like we were supposed to do. Right. This guy didn't help himself by bringing a gun to a gun-free zone at that point.
Right. And again, failing to mention that this gentleman pointed a gun at a corporal already.
Right.
So it's, it's so irresponsible, news reporting, and it's so irresponsible to put that out there because, like you said, somebody's breaking into grandmom's car. They're not going to come. The officers are going to sit back because here's the problem. They don't want to lose everything that they worked hard for because people out here are making the wrong choices and are choosing to do things that are dangerous. They're not going to come, or they're going to come after the fact. And they don't want to lose everything. My son has lost everything so far that he's worked for. He says, Mom, I've lost my reputation. People that know him that are close to him, we don't feel that way.
I don't feel that way.
But you're putting it out there, and now what are you going to do? You're going to paint this picture to a jury?
Right.
And here's the other thing. We want a court date. We want to go to trial. We have a fabulous use of force expert who has cited case law, cited about, unaliving by police, by, suicide by police, right?
Yeah.
We've cited all these things. We have all that. We're ready to go to court. And what do? They can't find a use of force expert. So now the last court hearing, they filed
amazing. You can find an expert for anything and they can't find one.
No,
they can't. Obviously they can. They just can't find the right one.
Right. Who's going to put their career on the line to lie for these fools, number one.
Right.
And number two, we want a date. We want to get this going. And now they filed a motion to throw our use of force expert out, that now we can't even go back until January 6th to now see when they're going to have a hearing to see if he's credible or not. He's got over 800 police shootings under his belt. He's had to lock up police officers. They're just doing this to push it ahead because they have nothing. And all their other cases against police officers are getting tossed because they're withholding exculpatory evidence and having prosecutorial misconduct. So I'm saying today, any senators, legislators, new incoming president, you know who I am, my buddy, I want whoever could put me in contact with them. I've messaged them. I've called them. I want help. I want someone to have the nerve to call me back and have this discussion with me instead of hiding behind all these other, progressive people who are destroying our country. That's a challenge for whoever wants to call me back. I'm going to wait.
Do you have any method of raising funds for Salvatore?
Yeah. So we did have a fundraiser last year for him, like a beef and beer, which, has helped him get through the year. But obviously it's not enough. He's got to pay health insurance every month.
Sure.
So we have a Give, Send, Go that we started back in August. So we're asking people, listen, I know times are tough, but, please, this is important. We give, we donate. We're always helping other families. And now it's time we need your help. We need people to listen to our story and to help him get through these next 6 months. Hopefully we'll have a trial date and this will be all put to bed very soon. But, if you can, please donate. We really appreciate it.
Drew, I'm going to ask one last question of you before we wrap up. And thank you, Barbara. I mean, the passion of a mother shines through. One, the passion of a police wife and police mother is intensified by about 1,000.
Sister, cousin,
and sister. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I really appreciate your advocacy. I understand that it's not a necessity in this case. But Drew, your opinion on, is this not every cop's nightmare? One, to have to deal with taking a life, but two, to be indicted on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd been one of the best days of my son's life if this guy just put the gun down or didn't come outside with the gun. And then as far as the indictment, my son gets indicted because it's a low level, and he got indicted because they said police didn't give commands for this guy to drop the gun, which we know is a lie, and they didn't de-escalate, which you don't have to. You don't have to give commands only when feasible, but that's what they did, and they indict him, and
and if I remember right, Drew, they did give commands.
They did give commands, right, and everyone knows that. You can hear it, But according to the AG's office, they put out in the paper, no commands were given and no de-escalations. And you don't have to do that in a deadly force situation. It's only when feasible. And they the AG violated their own policy, the use of force policy.
Mm-hmm.
So in the big scheme of things, and John, I'm going to give you last word in a second, then I'll wrap up. But just in the big scheme of things, this is cops and robbers. We never had to cheat and win. We never had to cheat to win. And in fact, the press is, they're held to, they always want to cite the dishonesty of police officers and all that. And they never look in the mirror. They always look out the window and point at us. Because when it comes down to it, they can write and say anything they want. They can interpret the facts any way they want without any training or experience or whatever. When it comes down to Salvatore's testimony, it's going to be under oath. It's going to be truthful testimony because this is how he was raised as a family man. This is how he was raised as a police officer. And end of story. He's telling the truth. He told the truth. He told the truth the whole time. They allowed him to work. This is like a clear-cut version of what they're calling justice, but is actually revenge. And we don't work in a criminal revenge system. We work in a criminal justice system, and it has to the scales of justice has to weigh on both sides.
Right.
And if you as an attorney general, you as a police accountability head of the police accountability area, if you feel that the scales are a little bit off, that's fine. It will definitely correct itself at some point, as long as you're watching. But if you cheat to win or you put your finger on the scale, that's what's going to put everybody else's safety in jeopardy.
Right.
That's going to make Barbara and everybody else in that town unsafe. That's going to make the school kids that she teaches unsafe.
Right.
Or anybody watching this. Your safety is being undermined by these malicious prosecutions.
Right.
Because cops don't want to do their job anymore because of this nightmare of a story that we're talking about right now. This guy is a model officer. He engaged in what he should have been doing that night. It was an unfortunate thing that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. It is very clear to me that he jumped into EMT mode, even though he didn't know he had shot the homeowner. He was still trying to save a life. He didn't care who it was. And that's not behavior of somebody that's reckless. Somebody that's reckless is going to shoot and walk away, or shoot and take a deep breath, or shoot and make jokes about it, like the guy with the water or whatever.
Right.
That's reckless. What your son did was noble. He's noble. I got his back. I hope everybody that I saw some of your appearance on Anti-Hero podcast. I'm sure that they have your back. We're here. We're listening. Matthew Cox hopefully has your backs. And we're in it to win it. John, do you have anything else?
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you again. I know that it's a personal crusade for both of you, but you came to appear on our show, and it's helpful to us, and I'm glad that we can help each other. But just want to echo Drew's sentiments that the people that you want to respond in your moment of need are your neighbors. People like Salvatore Odradi live in your neighborhood, and they have families, and they're just like you, and they choose a noble profession, and they choose to go and put themselves in danger. But if we create a society, or if we allow greedy, opportunistic politicians to create a society where police officers have no incentive to put themselves, their career, their pension, their family life, their freedom, their lives on the line, then we're not going to have that. You think that we've moved on from the defund era because you're not seeing it on TV and people aren't marching for that? The police have been defunded. It's not just a matter of line items in a budget. Police have been defunded in terms of their morale, in terms of their effectiveness, in terms of their willingness to go out there. How many good police officers have we seen walk away from the profession? Drew here is still doing Philly SWAT. I asked him before the show how he managed to get through those 4 years. He's basically indestructible, but not every police officer is built like Drew. We had other police officers who threw their hands up after everything that's happened in the last 4 years and cases like this and said, why me? Why should I bother to go through this? I look at a case like Salvatore Odradi, and I don't want to do that. I could go be a welder or a carpenter or something else where I don't have to risk going to jail. But you want good police officers, and you don't want them to be defunded in terms of morale. So even if you don't live in New Jersey, even if you're far away and you don't feel like you can have a lot of impact on this case, you need to be vigilant, because in your own community, you never know Police officers, as I've said many times, are only 8, 10, or 12 hours away from being on the news or having their lives ruined. It could always happen on the next shift. We see that every day as a police officer and as 911 dispatchers working in law enforcement, and we need to be vigilant about what's going on with our own politicians and not letting them get away with it.
And I'm sorry.
I just want you guys to go ahead and take it away with whatever else we may have missed or what else you want to say.
I was going to say, police officers wake up every day and they don't know what that day is going to bring. I know I'm going to go to work. I know the students that are in my classroom. I know what I have to teach. And I know by the end of the day what exactly everything's laid out for me. Police officers wake up every day. They don't know if they're going to save a life that day, if they're going to have to take a life, or they're going to have to give their life. I'm sure there's plenty of officers that are no longer with us, and their families wished that they didn't hesitate, or they, acted a little quick, because now they're gone. They're gone. They're never going to get the chance to see their family again because they might have hesitated, or they weren't prepared for what was coming. I'm very thankful that my son is still here, but we still have to fight because they can still take him away from me. And I just simply cannot let that happen. So, the whole charge with just reckless manslaughter doesn't even fit what's happening. It's an overcharge. So I'm just pleading, whoever sees this, whoever can pass this along, somebody that can put me in touch with somebody that can help me continue doing these podcasts and putting the word out there. I encourage you to reach out.
A lot of these units, these progressive ADs, DAs, and AGs were public defenders who are now prosecutors and have an axe to grind against the police.
Drew, I guarantee Salvatore thinks the same way. Drew, you and I are probably the same.
Mm-hmm.
Come to a fair fight. Like if you're a public defender and you got an axe to grind with the cops, that's fine. Come bring it to your courtroom. And I'll get on the stand and I'll tell my side of the story. You get on the stand and you tell your side, and we'll see what the jury says. And we pray that the jury understands, that how life actually is, not how they want to paint it to be, because this is a clear case of that. Listen, there's a silent killer in law enforcement. It's not just the danger of pulling up to a house where a guy's got a gun and he's pulling it out and pointing it at your corporal or pointing it at you. There's PTSI that lives forever. There's demons from the past. There's also, look, the guy's name is Salvatore Aldrade. He's got a name, and he's got a child, and he's got a wife, and he's got a mom, and he's got a dad, and he's got a brother and a sister, and their Thanksgivings are different from here on out. Their Christmases are different. There's an albatross hanging around this poor kid's neck that must weigh about 200 pounds, and it's wrongful because he's a good guy. He is one of the good guys protecting public from the bad guys. And he's been made out to be a bad guy, and we know he's not. Right. So keep that in mind, America. It's your public safety that's being undermined here. If you're going to take out guys like Salvatore Aldrade and put them on trial, nobody's going to blame the Exodus when it happens.
If you think that you have a case against Salvatore, then let's have it out. He deserves a right to a speedy trial, so let's try it if that's the route you're going to go. Don't drag it on forever. I'm pretty disgusted by all that. And again, thank you to both of you for being on the show, Drew.
Thank you to both of
you. Greatly appreciate it.
We appreciate you letting us come on.
You guys are welcome back at any time. I hate to say this, but it's like the process probably isn't close to being over. And if there's turns in the case or things that you want to get out, you know how to get in touch with me and Drew.
Yes.
We're hoping that when vindication comes, that we can just have a happy podcast. We can talk about how what's done in the dark gets brought to the light, because I believe that
we'll have Salvatore come on.
Listen, we wanted to go viral too, and it's not for the selfish motivation. Find this story on another podcast. I don't care, but share it. Share it. No matter where you see this story, share it far and wide. This is what's wrong with our country right now, and I pray that the course gets corrected here, and I especially pray that Salvatore finds the peace that he deserves, and whatever he wants to do from here, he's able to follow that path. So that's it for now. Please go back and listen to the previous episode we did covering this case if you want further details. I think John put a link to the Give, Send, Go in the description. So please, consider the holidays are coming up.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm little Drew in comparison. Thank you for watching. Thanks for being a part of our family.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Comm Center. You guys take care.